Franklin County Commissioners meeting, November 26, 2019.
Good evening. It is, I was going to say 9 a.m., but it is 7 o'clock on our quarterly evening meeting, and we have all three commissioners, our administrator and clerk, and an audience tonight. So if you would rise with me and join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Because of our short agenda tonight, our first item on the agenda is public comment. Anybody would like to speak to the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'll let this gentleman go first, but I do have a copy of a letter from an individual in Franklin County who would like to have his comments heard by the board. He is unable to be here.
Okay.
So we can do that whenever you would prefer.
Good evening. George Dockstader, 4951 South Landing Road. I want to thank you for holding an evening meeting again. I need to do it more often so the public can get here, especially those that have to work. I'd like to see it on a regular basis. And the other thing I'd like to see is why can't you put the public on an email blast so we can get the agendas, get the budgets, find out what's going on. It's not that hard to do. I'm sure the commissioners get email. So it should be something that the public gets.
I think that's all on the county website, all of it. Agendas, minutes,
Why not
budget.
Do you get email or do you go to the website?
Or the website.
You go to the website, you don't get an email.
No.
Well, it's something the county should consider. It'd be a whole lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Yes, this is a letter received from a Franklin County resident by the name of James Hansen. It's particularly relevant to our discussion that will take place later in the meeting regarding I-976. It says, Commissioners, I am a 78-year-old partially disabled man who has lived in the Tri-Cities for over 40 years and retired from Battelle 4 years ago. I am unable to attend your meeting due to two chronic health conditions. One is pulmonary in nature that makes me unable to climb the stairs necessary to gain access to the Pasco Courthouse. The other is an autoimmune disease that requires compromising of my immune system and thus prevents me from mixing with the general public, particularly during flu season. Thus, I request that this statement be read at the meeting and entered into the record for your consideration. As a retiree, my wife and I live on Social Security and some retirement savings. Social Security is not enough for our needs, thus we're hoping that our retirement savings outlast us. However, we notice that all our costs of living are increasing significantly and constantly, causing our resources to dwindle ever faster. Because of this situation, we vote against all tax increases, and when the rare opportunity occurs, we vote for tax decreases, such as offered by I-976. We cannot afford to keep paying for bigger government. Our situation is typical of the large number of retirees living within Franklin County. We make three major observations regarding the situation in Franklin County and Washington State. One, we recognize that when our costs increase and available funds for spending thereby decrease, we must reallocate our budget to make it balance. We have no other option. We expect that government should or must do the same thing. I-976 will reduce government income. We expect government to reallocate its budget just like we have to. Yes, we realize that will mean a reduction in services from the government. We must live with that. Second, we recognize that the principle behind I-976 is not just about vehicle license tabs, rather it is about the size of government and taxation in general. We understand that when government increases taxes on any sector of our economy, the amount of those taxes quickly trickles down and becomes costs to the public in one way or the other. For example, lower wages or layoffs, increased prices, etc. The will of the people when passing initiatives like I-976 is that government reduce its costs by whatever means best meet public needs. But the government is absolutely required to reduce its costs. Third, we believe that government's attempt to thwart the will of the public by refusing to accept and enforce the will of the people is directly in opposition to the intended purpose of government, which is to represent the will of the public. Such attempts drive a serious wedge between the public and their supposedly representative government servants. In fact, such behavior is blatantly unlawful in principle and is characteristic of resistance movements that are trying to destroy the principles of our Constitution. Of course, we observe that this is happening at the federal level right now, and we are fearful of what it will mean to America's future. Washington State is part of that resistance movement, and we don't appreciate that at all. And we surely don't want Franklin County to mimic what's happening on the west side of the state. We thank you for your service to us who reside in Franklin County. We trust that you will reallocate your budget in such a way as to do the best you can for us all. Respectfully submitted, James E. Hansen.
Thank you. Public comment time.
Jeff Robinson, proud resident of Commissioner Peck's district. I actually wanted to apologize to Commissioner Didier because I know, right? So at our last meeting, I was talking about how we shouldn't cast aspersions on one another when we're trying to have a civil conversation, and I feel as though the way that I said that made it seem as though I was accusing you of being unfriendly in some way or unethical. That wasn't what I meant. I was simply asking for civility, and I would like to apologize to you on the public record and directly because I really didn't mean that the way that I think that that sounded. Nobody said anything, but still, if you don't correct yourself, who will?
Thanks. I didn't take offense to it.
Anybody else? And nobody, will go on to payroll. Vouchers.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like we have one item this evening under payroll. And this is fund expenditures. I move for approval in the amount of $631,939.42. Note that this has been reviewed and signed off by the county administrator and 2 representatives from the county auditor's office.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That is the only financial matter we have this evening.
Okay, we'll move on to approve agenda 1 through 2.
Move for approval of the consent agenda items 2 total as presented.
I second with discussion on 1 and 2.
Discussion?
On item number 1, if I could get Mr. Mahoney. I'm looking for clarity on this. I went through this and I've looked at it, and the county roads is $1,774,410.37. Now I know that it says RCW 36.33A.040 rates for the rental of equipment owned by the fund shall be set to cover all costs of maintenance and repair. Now, going through the list, I see road graders. Now, do we not rent those from Caterpillar?
Yeah, all of our road graders are either on a 5-year buyback program,
Okay.
or they're on a lease program with a buyout, very similar to the buyout program.
Okay.
So what we collect on those is really the costs associated with those annual lease payments, as well as all O&M costs, which would include fuel and any of the
Service.
minor repairs that we would do, normal
Maintenance.
Okay, so this ER and R. So for the public, please explain what ER and R is.
ER&R stands for the Equipment Rental and Revolving Fund, and it is a fund that is designed really to pay for itself, to be self-sustaining. I could go into much greater detail, but really the premise of it is to have a location, a fund specifically set up for the maintenance of vehicles, but also a fund that a major portion of it is replacement costs. So when we charge rental rates, those rental rates also include a surcharge for the future replacement of that piece of equipment or vehicle at the end of its useful life. And that fund really serves as kind of the repository for those funds until it's time to replace the vehicles and equipment.
So what I'm having a hard time here, Matt, is we rent from Caterpillar and then we're renting this out? Am I following this right? Or what I'm trying to figure out is this ER&R fund, we're actually renting the equipment.
We're leasing the equipment.
We're leasing the equipment, but we're leasing it from Caterpillar and then we're leasing it out, correct?
We lease it, the motor vehicle fund, ER&R fund, actually leases that equipment, and they rent it out on an hourly basis to the county road fund. And what the costs that are included in that rental rate include the cost of the lease as well as all of the normal O&M costs that would be associated with it. So yes, the fund actually, for all intent and purpose, owns the piece of equipment, and it is the county road department that rents that equipment directly from the motor vehicle fund.
Okay, but when we rent from Caterpillar, aren't they responsible for all maintenance and cost to fix anything that is broken down? Or
We need to separate. We do rent certain pieces of equipment.
right?
We do rent those. Those would be rented. Those would be paid for directly by the department or fund that's renting them.
Okay.
In this case, these are leases, and part of the lease is just like any lease, you're responsible to put fuel in it. You're responsible to change the oil, filters, but any major repairs through the lease agreement, they provide us with a loaner until they do the major repairs.
And then they're also doing the oil change and the maintenance of
Our
everything.
guys do that. We're
we're doing
responsible
that.
for all normal maintenance on the equipment. Just as
Okay.
if anybody was leasing an automobile from a dealership, yes.
All right, I was just trying to get clarity on that
that's-
because I was trying to figure this whole thing out. I'm new to this. I still don't have a year under my belt. Okay, so I'm trying to figure this all out.
And I'm trying not to be too wordy because this is an area that I became intimately knowledgeable in 2012, and so I enjoy talking about it. So I don't like to bore people either, but it's definitely a topic that I enjoy talking about. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
One thing I would like to add, if the board is when in 2012, and I don't think I need to remind everybody what occurred in 2012. In my previous function with the county as a design engineer, I was asked to review the rental rate structure and really kind of establish. And what I noticed is we didn't really have a structure back in those days. But from 2012, once we reestablished the structure of the rental rates through the ER&R, and that's based on guidance that comes from the County Road Administration Board as well as the state auditor. When we did that, from 2012 to even 2020, the fund is doing really, really well, and we are keeping costs down. The annual growth between 2012 and 2020 is only 1.44%. So it's certainly a fund that I believe that the county, that I work for the board, and it's something that since we've gotten this taken care of, to only see a percent, an annual growth from one year to the next over that period of 1.44, that's well below.
Matt, are you trying to say the cost of vehicles and maintenance haven't gone up more than 1.44% a year?
They have. Most of our cost savings has been on how we're running that shop, and we've certainly lowered the amount of people we have over there, and really just managing the shop better.
So in the part you're not telling people, because you're a pretty humble guy, is that you've divvied up what needs to go to local small business where they can do it more efficiently, more effectively, and you're keeping the stuff in-house that we can do. And that's smart. I know you weren't going to tell people that, but a lot of that, keeping the cost down, has been your management, so well done.
And you've brought some good people in that shop also that gets them,
Yes, we have.
keeps the cost down when get the job done rapidly and once instead of constantly redoing the job.
I've learned real quick that cultural shifts within any department are very difficult, and we've had our ups and downs, but we feel like we're on a pretty good trajectory, and I thank the board for their guidance and input as we move forward. That's valuable to me, so I appreciate any questions that come up, and
Thank you.
if I can't answer them, then shame on me.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Matt.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, on the consent item number 2, I asked for the previous policy on this and didn't find one. Did we have a previous policy on the meals?
This is a new policy to address some of the issues that have been raised in the past about the provision of meals when employees are not in technically a travel status. It's pretty. We do have a travel policy that follows GSA reimbursement guidelines for meals when somebody's traveling outside of the city. So this was intended to cover those expenditures, those circumstances where a county employee may be provided a meal in conjunction with necessary county business.
So in essence, what we're talking about is the training days that
Yes.
we've been in a discussion before about.
Correct.
And this is outside, or this is inside the 50-mile limit. So we're not supposed to be including meals, but now we're going to include them.
Only in very limited circumstances.
The Franklin County travel policy says in the Benton-Franklin metropolitan area.
Right.
Well, I can put on 80 miles within the metropolitan area. So a 50-mile doesn't, it's the 2 counties that.
In our previous, in February 5th, we passed the new travel policy, or adapted the new travel policy. In the old travel policy, there was a 50-mile limit that was set on the old travel policy that, as far as reimbursement for travel and reimbursement for meals, correct?
Yes, this is independent of that travel policy.
Yeah, this is independent of that.
Yes.
Do you mind if I talk about this travel policy for a minute? Do you mind, Chairman?
No, it's relevant.
Because in the present one that we signed February 5th, there is no mention of this 50-mile area. And I was curious as to why, I guess it was excluded. I was basically 5 meetings into being a new commissioner. And the previous policy that was signed in 2012 specifically stated that it was a 50-mile radius of Franklin County. And the new one doesn't say that at all, and I guess the reason being is because I asked for clarity on this because I didn't want to be out of compliance being a new commissioner. I wanted to know travel policy and the fact that I was unaware and pretty, I guess, green to the idea of this, but in getting this delivered to me, I asked the auditor's office to put this together for me, and it's really well done. It has all the commissioners, and it even had Commissioner Miller in here, and I was curious. I wanted to see how Commissioner Miller treated his travel policy, and he never put in for reimbursement. And then on the 50-mile radius, I was a little bit shocked, and then a little bit, I guess, alarmed at the fact that of all these people that were listed here, the 3 commissioners and our PA, that everybody was taking a different approach to this. And being that this policy has now been changed and I actually signed on to it in January, where there's no 50-mile, are we still using that? And are we still supposed to be taking the 50 miles off when we leave this area and then come back to it when we travel on business outside of this?
You're speaking specifically to mileage reimbursement.
Yes.
If you exceed 50 miles of travel, then
Okay.
you can get reimbursed for that.
But it's
mileage.
not stated in the new policy that we signed in February, so has it been taken out?
I'd have to go back to look specifically what our new policy complies with the what's called the GSA, the Government Services Agency guidelines, and I believe we're consistent with that. So if it states it in there, then it would be consistent with our policy. It's something I'd probably have to go back and.
Well, then we have a problem with this, and I would like to ask for an independent review of this.
Certainly.
The SAO, if they could please look at this, I'd really appreciate it. If I could ask for that independent review, I'd really appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, to my knowledge, the SAO doesn't do anything without asking the county for an open checkbook in which we pay for their time. In my view, this is something the county administrator can review just fine without the county taxpayers paying for the state auditors to come in. If we can't come to agreement locally, then certainly we can spend the money to have state auditors come in, but this doesn't rise to the level to warrant that expense.
Well, I disagree, because this is put in there, and it's strictly stated in here in this policy that
I'm not taking a position on what the policy says.
whereas Franklin County Commissioners desire to constrain transportation costs to the county while maintaining travel allowances for elected officials whose duties require frequent local and non-local travel. Down here it says commissioners and the PA may receive a monthly travel allowance, which we do. We receive a monthly travel allowance of $611 a month. And that is what is supposed to be used for this immediate area here, the Benton-Franklin area.
And 2012 is so outdated that you have 2019 and December 1 of 2019. So there's.
Yes, I agree.
It's been updated from that.
But the 50-mile radius was taken out. It is not in here anymore.
And changed to metropolitan area.
Okay, metropolitan area.
Benton, Franklin
So it
County.
does still apply. So I think that really I'd like a review of this outside the courthouse.
I would suggest when the auditors come in the spring, when they come in and have the entrance exam, that's one of the questions.
Okay.
Ask them to look at.
I can certainly support that, as long as it doesn't involve a separate visit with us handing them an open checkbook for their costs.
Yeah.
Be happy to ask them to review that.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Keith, it's your turn already.
I have been working with my red pen feverishly on the county budget, and when we completed the budget workshops with the departments and agencies, as you will recall, we were still pretty deep in a deficit situation with our county budget. I'm focused primarily on the current expense piece of that. I might invite Tom Westerman up here from the auditor's office to be my wingman on this presentation. But at the end of those budget workshops, we were nearly $2 million in a deficit position. And we have been working with departments. We have not had detailed conversations with every department independently of the board, but making some recommendations of what we think are absolutely essential priorities for the county moving forward, have some recommendations that we think that the board ought to consider. We're making some recommendations with respect to personnel, let me start with some revenue considerations. We have reviewed the detailed revenue receipts for what we have so far this year and what we anticipate through the end of the year, recognizing that we don't physically receive all of our 2019 revenues until January and February of next year. We have to accrue for those. So there's a fair amount of estimating involved in our year-end balances and 2019 revenues. We'll have the same challenge in 2020 and every year going forward. Having said that, we think that we can make adjustments comfortably of about $480,000 to that budget deficit, which reduces our hole that we still have to fill. We want to make some considerations on personnel. We recognize that there were a total of, I believe, 7 recommendations for personnel changes. As an example, I had requested the addition of a analyst in the Commissioner's office. I have pulled that out because I don't think we have the money to pay for it. The sheriff has requested 4 additional deputies. I think you're well aware of the circumstances the last couple of weeks have put some of his road deputies in a situation where he's had to cover for their absence due to an internal investigation going on from a deputy-involved matter. They are very stretched with their resources. As I said, he requested 4. I think we can afford to replace fund 2 of those positions and probably only fund those for 3/4 of the year. I realize it would take some time to recruit and find people to fill those positions, so we would not anticipate salary expenditures until after the start of the first quarter. The challenge with that is obviously it goes into the base for 2021 and escalates the salary line, but that I think is in terms of trying to balance this budget, a necessary step. It also does not include the position that was requested by the assessor's office for an additional assessor. And those are just some necessary choices I think we're going to have to make. I'm happy to go through some level of detail with any of these suggestions. These are kind of the high-level marks. I know in the interest of the time, I know the public's interested in this issue. I can be happy, and Tom can be happy to answer any specific questions we have. With respect to capital requests, we anticipate being able to fund a lot of those through our 1/4% real estate excise tax collections. We have enough money in there that will be ongoing to support most of our capital requirements. There are some that we will not be able to, at least immediately. We will have to wait and see what revenues look like during mid-year. For example, the facilities department and the coroner's office both requested additional vehicles that are not included in the current budget recommendation. The sheriff's office requested some additional funds for vehicles. We've included most of that, but not all of it, recognizing that if we hire deputies, they're going to need vehicles to drive and the replacement of existing vehicles. Another important consideration is looking at possibility in a preliminary road shift. That includes the law enforcement piece. You remember last year when we went through that exercise, we had significantly increased what we call the road shift from county roads, the levy for county roads, to the current expense fund. We've set that again at $1.7 million in total, that would be a necessary addition. Something to consider. It's not a large amount of money, but the 1% of countywide collections of property taxes that we are allowed under the earlier property tax limitation initiative, as well as we have about $80,000 of banked capacity that we did not use in prior years. That leaves us roughly still almost $560,000 in the hole, even with those recommendations. You will recall last week we approved the separation of the Department of Human Services from a bi-county function to a single county function, and in that agreement the Benton County Treasurer is going to remit to the Franklin County Treasurer considerable funds that is specifically set aside for people with developmental disabilities and with mental health issues. In our preliminary research, we believe that much of the medical costs associated with the jail facility and with the Juvenile Justice Center are related to increases in mental health costs, and that with the use of that money that is set aside for mental health, we will be able to address a lot of our medical contract that would reduce the burden on the current expense fund to provide those services. That's going to get us fairly close to balancing the budget, not completely there, but it's going to get us within
480, wasn't it, or 485?
probably, probably the total amount remitted immediately would be $587,000, but
Okay.
not all of that will be, or not all of the eligible costs for mental health within the two facilities has been fully calculated yet. Just in a rough order of magnitude, we've identified close to $400,000. So I think we're going to be within, $100,000 to maybe $150,000 of closing the gap, as it were, assuming the board wants to go down this road and make these recommendations. So with that as kind of a high-level overview, I probably will stop and respond to questions, because I realize there's a lot of questions in what I just shared with you.
Keith, let me just start with the last item. The remittance from Benton County out of Human Services. Do we know the period of time over which those dollars, the 580-some thousand, were collected? Was that an annual collection?
No, the 587 is an accumulation
was
since
accumulation.
2017.
So even if we got that and we bridge this budget with it, that's a one-year fix.
There's still money coming into that. So in short, yes, but there is some long-term benefit from that.
The concept of using some of those dollars to offset mental health costs in the jail, I'm totally on board with that. I just want to be clear that that particular proposal would be a one-year fix, not an ongoing solution.
Correct.
Okay.
So you're talking about shifting $1.7 million from our road fund.
Correct.
And when we heard Mr. Mahoney's presentation, he stated that our roadways are how many years behind schedule? Matt, what did you say, 15 years?
15 to 20 years.
15 to 20 years, and I'm out there driving those roads right now, and we've got problems. So we're going to shift this money from our roads, which is our avenue to get our products to market, to fund the courthouse.
I don't disagree with your assessment. We've known for a long time that counties are on a unsustainable financial platform. We have a legal obligation to balance the budget at the end of the day. I don't disagree with your sentiment, and understand that my efforts are not really an advocacy position. I do what I think is in the best interest of the county overall.
And I talked to you before the meeting about our rainy day fund, emergency fund, whatever you call it, and we talked about it's behind big time. We're at 900,000, and we should be at 2.1 million. And I don't see how we can increase our budget anywhere when we're looking at these kind of deficits.
So county funding, for those of us that have watched this for a few years now, is beyond unsustainable. I see a gentleman from Kona Radio here. I was on with them the other day and was explaining that with the state legislature sending us a steady stream of unfunded mandates and us not having the legal obligation to simply say no, we find ourselves trying to get funds wherever we can. And it's not too many years in the future when we either have radical changes to what we pay for, and I'm certainly open to that discussion, or counties start combining and the state starts looking like it did 100 years ago. The state was formed by joining the counties, not the other way around, and most of the counties were much bigger. And if you think that our difficulties are serious, you have to look at counties like Whitman and Garfield and some of those where they're extremely small budgets, and a $100,000 shift to them is monumental. It's a roundabout way of saying nobody wants to shift money from the road fund, and if someone has an idea for another revenue source that'll let us pay for our mandated expenses, I'd love to hear it. And lastly, if anyone wants to have a discussion about going through the budget and carving out $1.7 million, two things are going to happen. One is I'll be the first guy to sign up and say, sure, let's do that exercise. and we're going to cut the county staff dramatically. And I'm not saying that maybe we ought to do that, and I'm thinking it is probably a good exercise. This probably isn't the time to do it, but I'd certainly put that on the plate for 2020 and say that make that one of our objectives, to look at it and at least theoretically go through the budget and say if we wanted to eliminate the road shift and keep all this money in our road system, what would it take in the rest of current expense to make that happen? How many deputies, how many folks out of the assessor's office, the auditor's office, out of the courts, out of the treasurer's? I think what we'll find is an awful lot of our expenses are mandated by the state legislature, and perhaps we ought to be telling them more than we do. So I'll leave it there.
Anything further?
Just one other note, and that's on the reference to consideration of a 1% countywide collection of property taxes. It often gets misunderstood that when we talk about a 1% increase, it's not a 1% increase in the tax rate. It's for every $100 that the county collected last year, the maximum that we could collect the next year would be $101. So the 1% is on actual dollars collected. It's not a rate. For those of you who are seeing your taxes go up, it is, in my opinion, likely due to two things. First and foremost, increased costs in schools. I live in Pasco. 70%, give or take, of my tax bill is schools. It's not the county. And if you work the numbers out, you'll see that the 1% increase in raw dollar collection for us is, what is it, 94, less than $100,000 on a nearly $40 million budget. So that 1% often gets misunderstood, and it's a minor factor. Whether we take it or not isn't going to change the budget.
Comes nowhere near inflation.
If I could, Commissioners, little housekeeping here. We're set to adopt the budget on December 3rd, which is coming right on up. I don't know if that's realistic, really. Maybe we could turn that into a workshop and sharpen our pencils before then. Maybe talk about this mental health thing, see if that's going to work at least this year going forward. So I think we just need to wait probably at least a week after that, but workshop on that day and maybe go through some of the nuts and bolts of what's making the current deficit.
Tom, if I remember the statute correctly, we have to approve it by the end of the calendar year? Okay. So we do have time to do that. I can support that. I just want to add one other thought. If others, like myself, wish we didn't have to shift so much from the road fund and want to propose cuts elsewhere in the budget to reduce that road shift, I'd be happy to entertain that discussion as well.
If I may, I just want...
Matt's already raised his hand and said, wait, not so fast.
I just wanted to add that the WACs require the commissioners to actually approve the major equipment purchases as well as the annual construction program prior to approval of the budget. Typically, we hold off on doing that until we have a better understanding of any necessary changes that we need to make, because that can certainly affect the annual construction budget. So the more time we have to make the adjustments and get that in front, it can be done at the same time. It just becomes a chronological order of approval, but certainly as much heads up as we can get, the better for us to be able to submit that in enough time for the board to approve that prior to the budget.
Working with Keith, I'll participate whatever schedule you come up with.
And maybe I could just add one last thing for the benefit of Commissioner Didier. I realize this is your first year of going through this detailed budget. I know how painful it is. But maybe for the benefit of the public as well, none of us like the idea of shifting funds from the county road fund to the general fund. To put it a little bit in perspective, many, if not most, other counties do the same thing, some to a much higher degree than even we do, and they're dealing with the exact same problem of deteriorating roads. And also, in point of perspective, construction of a road today is easily close to $1 million a mile. So if we were to have no transfer of or shifting of the levy, it would not materially change the benefit Franklin County's roads. I realize every dollar helps, every dollar matters, but I want the public to be under no illusion that if we didn't do a road shift, suddenly we would have wide, painted, striped, well-built highways all over. It's a difficult
County
issue.
Road Board, we are not alone. Every other county in the state's in the same situation. The preservation of the roads are, as Matt says, 10 to 15 years behind. King County's got, I think, I heard over 200 bridges that are deficient. So,
I suppose, given that 976 is next in the agenda, we ought to probably also note that, and I don't know all the numbers off my head, but the impact of 976 in terms of dollars to the county probably will make the road shift look minuscule.
Yeah.
It's not taking a position for or against
Right.
976. I'm just saying the dollars that play there and the impact on the community are a lot bigger than this road shift.
And I do also need to, the clerk has reminded me that we have already announced December 3rd as the public hearing that for the budget, so we can have that public hearing. But to change the date of setting the budget would require a new notice, which we can do. Just thank you for reminding me.
need a whiteboard.
If there's no further questions on that issue, it does kind of move us into the next discussion. As you well know, there's been considerable, thank you, Mr. Westerman, considerable discussion statewide around the I-976 initiative that's recently been voted on. The certification of that vote will take place next week. I know Commissioner Didier has been personally involved in some of those legal matters, and perhaps you'd like to brief the board on what you have learned and let the...
Well, our
that
attorney was
discussion.
in the courtroom today.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes.
I'm very happy to have a discussion on 976. I'm as interested in the topic as anybody in the room, and I suspect that Mr. Didier and I have very, very similar views on the policy, but it's not appropriate and it's probably illegal to have discussions in this public forum of the activities of a private political action committee. So I want to be on the record up front as saying we need to avoid going there, and when the commentary starts with our attorney was in court today, it sounds like that's directly where we're going. No offense to anyone, but every citizen for or against 976, conservative, liberal, anywhere in between, has a right for these meetings to be apolitical.
It was a public meeting, public format. And it's already been announced on the radio as what transpired in that, so I don't think we're getting into any legal problems here. But like I was saying, I-976 should have been challenged by counties. Now, we don't, for some reason, we think that's breaking the law, but we were told at the last meeting the only thing they could have done was thrown it out of the court. We would have had a much better standing if counties would have stepped forward as unified in this. What we do have is we had some individuals, I being one of them, that challenged it because we have a judge whose name is Ferguson also, that is paid by King County, is hearing the case in King County, and King County's a plaintiff. Now, if you don't think there's a conflict of interest there, there is. Also, Ferguson has a pending lawsuit against Iman, our Attorney General, Bob Ferguson. That also is a conflict of interest. So our brief we filed was a change of venue and a change of representation. Now, all that was heard today was our Attorney General, who was represented by another attorney, their argument, which was pretty darn good. Our Attorney General argument that I-976 is legit and legal was good. It was very good. as presented. But it doesn't sound like the judge is going to leave it at that. This is basically, it looks to me as if it's cut and dried, and they're going to throw it out. They're looking for any means possible. Now, we heard that how devastating this is going to be to the state. Yes, it's going to cut $4 billion out of the transportation fund. But in the sale of new and used automobiles, as it's been stated by Senator Fontenotto, that if those funds were to remain in the transportation budget, it would be $1.4 million a year. So in 6 years, we're going to lose $4 billion. Every year, we're going to get $1.4 billion if they left it in the transportation budget, which would mean $8.4 billion over the 6 years. But what we have here is we have a legislature and a governor that are out of control. They're misappropriating our funds. They're collecting our monies to be spent in an area, and they're diverting them to other areas, the general fund. So my question is, when are we, the counties, going to stand up to these unfunded mandates and this abuse of our taxes that they're collecting and not using appropriately where they're supposed to be used? This is my question. When are we, the people, going to start standing up and saying enough is enough? And as a county, you might throw an unfunded mandate on us, but what's our legal right? I guess that would be our PA here. What's our legal right to stand up to an unfunded mandate when it's driving our taxes through the roof and we can't even make our budget? What's our legal? What do we have legally to stand up to this? Sean, do you have an answer for me?
So while Mr. Sant is thinking about that, I'll point out the Washington State Association of Counties and this board has approved filing a lawsuit against the state legislature challenging the unfunded mandates that they've levied on us. And the test case is likely going to be the matter of ballot boxes, not because it's the major cost, but because it's a very clear example of an unconstitutional unfunded mandate. So the answer to the question is, this county, together with numerous other counties, went to WASAC, the Washington State Association of Counties, and persuaded them to do what has never been done before in this state, and that is to file a lawsuit on behalf of the counties against the state legislature. That's the proper vehicle and avenue to do it, and that's underway now.
When is that going to be filed?
I don't know the specific date, but WASAC can certainly provide it, and if need be, Keith can find it for us.
I'm thinking that may have already been filed, but I need to verify the date.
Anything further, Count? With that, it is our position for the second public comment of the agenda. Yes.
Oh, I couldn't resist such an impassioned discussion. So the question that I guess I would ask after hearing all of this, because I completely agree with you, Clint, that this is bullcrap. Seattle needs to pull its head out of its ass. Let's all just acknowledge what this is. This is a temper tantrum because they didn't get their way and they don't like being told no. Get over it. God help us, it happens. The question, though, that I ask is I hold in my hand the Attorney General's brief that was filed in court. Now, you yourself have said that what the Attorney General was arguing was a good argument. It seemed to me as though it was saying what I just said, only nicer, which is pull your head out of your ass and knock it off.
It's enough.
Questions?
Hold it.
Yes?
We put up with your language last week. I'm not going to do it this week.
I'm so sorry. Oh.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we talked about the budget. My name is Kurt Goodyear. I have a number of things. We could talk here for 24 hours with the stuff you guys discuss now. Pertaining to the road and the road department. I noticed last year, or about a year and a half ago, you guys went and put signs up on weight limits on bridges. Was that a deal for liability reasons, or because those bridges are now 60, 70 years old and you're concerned with them? You're the best one, Mr. Mahoney.
Actually, what we had was a federal mandate to go out and actually investigate our bridges and actually come up with bridge loading specifically for single units. What they're seeing is a rise on like concrete trucks, rock trucks that are still the same length, but they're just including more and more axles to try to kind of get past the normal loading of trucks. And so on a bridge, they're putting basically a lot more load on the bridge than, say, normal semis with trailers. So those are specifically to just those single units. It was a federal requirement. We went out and did those. It doesn't impact. I've had many conversations with some of our good farmers out there. It doesn't impact the trucks that you all are driving and hauling your products in and out of the county. It has more to do with these types of rock trucks or concrete trucks that are dropping all of these axles to kind of do it. So it's all about really load distribution on the bridges, and that's what the signs and the ratings stand for.
So how does that impact tractors when I got a tractor that weighs 50, 60 tons?
It doesn't.
It doesn't, okay.
It doesn't,
That's
because
my question.
those are considered to be double units because they have a separated semi with a trailer, and those fall under the normal restrictions and limitations. And if you have none now, you have none with those signs being up. Not to say that we don't have bridges out there that aren't posted for weight limits on double units, but it didn't really change those. Those have been there for a while, and of course, those are bridges that we are seeing some lowering in the structural deficiency that we're actively pursuing getting funding for, so to get those replaced.
Are you working with the Bureau on that? Because, I mean, I would think that they'd be partially responsible, not county 100% responsible.
Well,
I mean, I don't know, but I would think that would be kind of a joint venture deal.
Yes, we would hope, but unfortunately, the federal government transferred all of their bridges and roads that were part of the Columbia Basin project back in the late 40s, early 50s. So they're now our problem to deal with, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
That pretty much that. Thank you.
Great.
My next question is basically on the budget stuff. You're talking about the budget. We as farmers, and let me backtrack one iota. I disagree with Mr. Peck, not in his district or his deal with his taxes here in Pasco, but where I live in North Franklin County, through Connell, they've maintained over the last 15 years the same, Mr. Cook would know this, the same amount of budget for maintenance for the school as well as our construction. Ours is not increased like Pasco's.
Bonds and levies.
Levies and construction costs have not risen like Pasco. So my increase in my taxes over the last 10 years has been 100% or so we've gone to here, the county. Okay, not to the schools or whatever. Okay, mine have over doubled in the last 10 years. Double. I guess my deal is the county ain't got no bigger. We probably have a few more employees, some costs have went up. But when my taxes double in 10 years, and I guess we're still taking money from the road department, we're not getting better roads or different stuff. I kind of question where's it all going. Then we get into my part, that rolls right into the budget part in the essence that you talk about needing to cut some stuff. And one thing that's a thorn in my side has been for years, and Mr. Peck and Mr. Cook should know this because they were both on the board when I came here, and that's the BEVA account that we have. And now I understand that there's 7, 8, I don't know how many people taking out of salary. It's no longer the BEVA, it's rolled over into salary. Any place else, federal jobs, mostly, not all counties, because I know there's a couple other counties that have BEVA accounts, but most counties, you opt out of a medical plan because your spouse has a better plan, you don't get anything. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but I really have a problem with the stuff being rolled over into salary. Really have a problem with that. Because your salaries were set, and now all of a sudden you're $10,000, $11,000 more in salary. And you're talking about we're going to be at a $2 million shortfall, yeah, I got a problem. Okay? I don't have that luxury. When things hit the fan for me, I had to cut 2 employees. Sorry, got to go. Because I have to balance my budget. I can't increase the price of my wheat, can't increase the price of my hay. I can't say, hey, I gotta have this to make my budget work. They tell me what they're gonna give me, and then I gotta make it work. Your guys' deal here is a little bit different. You can say, yeah, we another 1% or 2%, or let's go reassess the value of your property and up at another 10% because we need a couple more $1 million to make this thing work. And I'm not saying that you're running the county poorly. I'm saying that I think it really needs to be looked at pretty hard of where we're spending our money, how we're spending our money. And I found out something years ago when I got in financial trouble is somebody looking on the outside could tell me, hey, here's what you're doing wrong. You may think that you know what's wrong, but when somebody looked in and said, hey, Kurt, you need to cut here, 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 and here, guess what? Turned it around. When I lifted somebody else's advice looking on the outside. I'm not saying take his advice and say it's 100% right, but somebody else looking in on the outside can say, boy, I can do that different and make it work. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Kurt.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a quick note to help round out that discussion. The county allows employees to take some of their health care dollars as VIVA, which is tax-free and a good way for people who want to avoid taxes. It allows them to spend it on health care. And only. And it also allows them to take it as taxable income. It's a technical and probably unimportant distinction. It's not part of salary. Our salaries are set at the start of a term, but it is lawful income. But the most important thing is, no matter which one of those three an employee chooses, it doesn't change the cost to the county 1 cent. It's the same cost regardless. Just thought I'd make that clear. Okay, thanks.
Further discussion?
Question on the budget. You know, if you can't figure any line items that you can cut specifically, maybe you better just do a 5%, 10% cut straight across the board. I mean,
we've done it.
If you can't do it, I mean, we all do it. I mean, it can be done. Don't say no. I don't want to hear it. So think of that.
So I came in 2009. I drafted most of the 2010 budget, and it was a 9% cut in staff and a 10% cut in spending, which is why earlier I said happy to participate in that. I've done it before. I'm no problem doing it again. What it really comes down to is, would the citizens like to see a smaller county with reduced services? And if the answer is yes, then we're the folks that can do that. So I appreciate your comments. Also wanted to speak to Mr. Didier's earlier reference about the cost of his taxes. I've already explained that for every $100 the county collected last year, the most they can collect next year is $101. So because your property taxes have gone up 100%, obviously there's something else in play. And what else is in play is that land values have skyrocketed, and when the assessor, who by the way is an independent elected official, comes out and values your property, the value of your land has gone up so much that your taxes are going up. And because we can't collect more than 101% last year, that means somebody else's taxes are going way down. They should be sending you a Christmas card at the least.
Excuse me, Mr. Fact, I got a rebuttal for that because
sure,
that 1% is one up. The 1% of what you collected last year is one up, what, 5 years down the road?
If more than that.
If you go up $1 on $100 every year for 10 years, even if you compound that, it takes a long time to get the 100%
but it's still
increase.
taxes. I mean, any way you slice it, it's still tax. $1 a year on what you previously collected for 5, 6, 8, 10 years, it compounds.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care how you slice it. So, I mean, don't say that it's not really that much because it is. You may have one home worth $300,000. I got a lot more than that. So it compounds pretty heavily.
Oh, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that at $1 on 100, that increase, real as it is minuscule compared to the impact on your taxes as a result of the extremely high value of the land in our county and how fast the values are going up. That's what's
But there's
killing
a big difference between what some people think the value is and some others. When you get an outside source that's all they're wanting is an investment, they don't care what they dump into it. I mean, I had a guy call me the other day and say, we want to buy your land. What's your price tag? You know, I'm not interested in selling. So is the ground worth what he's willing to pay? No, because I want to keep it. It's a family deal. My dad started here in the 50s.
Yeah.
Broke it out of sagebrush. I'm not interested in selling, so you can say, well, your ground's worth $50,000 an acre. No, it's not, because guess what? I'm not willing to sell that.
Yep.
You know, there might be somebody willing and stupid enough to pay it. He can never recoup his costs. I mean, did you realize what wheat was this last winter? $4.50 is what I sold my wheat for. Now, I think that's clear back in the 30s. I don't think ground was valued in $50,000, $40,000, $30,000 in the 30s, was it? I know what my dad paid $3 an acre in the 50s. Let's assess it at that. That's what we paid for it.
Yeah. I'm not taking any position on what your land is worth or not. That's what you elected your assessor to do. And the assessor uses sales.
I'm sorry, I didn't vote for him, but, you know, that's besides the point.
Well, that's fair enough.
If I may ask you a question before you leave the mic? When we talk about this, our land assessment, if there's not a pivot on that land, and there's not main line in that ground and a pump, what's that ground valued at? And why do we pay a sales tax on that equipment? I'm just asking you. And then when we put that on the ground, we pay every year on that equipment. I'm asking you, is this double taxation? Because we're paying for a inflated land price and we're paying for the equipment on the land. And if without that equipment, that land's not worth that money. It's just desert. Are we paying it? Are we getting double taxed on this land? Is my question.
We're getting double taxed on everything, whether it be the land or anything. You know, I mean, it's constant. You know, and this is minuscule compared to what the state's trying to do. But that's not another topic. You know, I've heard comments that there's a couple other people in this room that's sitting up there that they got their new assessment and stuff, and they weren't as happy with their new assessment and what their taxes are going up on some of their property too. So it's not just me; it's everybody. You know, and I don't know the answer because you know what? I don't see the budget, and I don't know who to cut or what to do. All I know is when it comes to mine, I've got to make hard decisions because I cannot raise taxes. I cannot raise the price of my crop. I can't raise anything. My deal is, like I said, I'm told what you're going to get paid, and I go, here's what I got to do to make it work if I want to keep in business another year.
Yeah. There is one thing we ought to all be doing, and that is trying to get the legislature to pass legislation anytime that the state comes in or a state agency comes into our county and buys land at some ridiculously inflated value sometimes. We ought to be allowed, and I'm not certain that we're not. I have to check with Pete, but I don't think we have the right to exclude those sales when they do their comparisons. And if we can't exclude them, we should be allowed to exclude them. Because DNR comes in, they buy ground at $50,000 an acre when everybody else is paying 10 or 12. We ought to be able to exclude those kind of sales because they tilt the scales and increase the taxes. That's right. So.
And another one would be the teachers' unions and the teachers' pension plans because they're coming in and buying big swaths of land. I mean, I'm talking about now that the 960 rule is, it used to be that only an individual could own 960 acres in the irrigation project. Now that the irrigation project is paying off, you can buy an unlimited amount of acres. And they're the ones that are driving up the price of our land with these $18,000 plus purchases. And this is not fair to the public, the farmers, the families that want to continue and pass it on. This is not fair because it's driving us out of business.
Further?
One thing California probably did right was Prop 8.
Prop 8, yes. When you pay for that land, you pay taxes at that price.
Yeah.
That's what we need to get, but it takes our legislature.
Yeah.
So, this unrealized gain on taxes, I guess people won't make an outcry until they start taxing your stock portfolio every year, whether you sell it or not. I mean, can you imagine that? That's what it's going to come down to.
Yes, they're trying.
So, another thing, my brother, right next to him, the tribe bought land right next to him and bought it for $9.4 million, separate parcels within that bundle. One piece was last year was valued at $322,000. Now that the tribe owns it, it's $22,000. So, who's making up the difference there?
Right. Further comments? Rocky.
I'm Rocky Mullen. Last week there was discussion about gathering support from the other counties at Wasatch. And I was curious if anyone had reached out to the other counties and what the consensus was.
I was at Wasatch, and yes, I reached out to other counties, and they're on board. the majority, there was 33 counties out of 39 that voted for I-976. 9 of those counties were 70-plus percentage vote. We ended up at 72.1. Now, if we don't stand up for our voters, who's going to?
Right. Well, I agree.
But the rest of the counties weren't ready to stand up and sign on.
Did you reach out to anyone as far as trying to gather more support?
I don't recall. Were you at the meeting last week?
I was there at the meeting. I hardly ever miss a meeting, Brad.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I mentioned it is because I gave an explanation as to why I didn't go to the meeting.
I understand. I thought you said you were going to reach out to some the other counties.
I've talked to some of the other counties and talked with Eric Johnson at Wasack, and the collective opinion is that legal counsel, including, by the way, Stephen Pidgeon, who Commissioner Didier referred to in previous meetings as telling him that we, the county, could weigh in, and it did have standing, a legal position that was exactly opposite that from our own legal counsel. I understand that Mr. Pidgeon has since told
No,
Mr.
it wasn't
Johnson.
Mr. Pidgeon. It was Dick Stevens, Attorney Dick Stevens that told me.
Okay, well, we
Stephen
don't need
Pidgeon said it was individuals. He said the best route would be individuals. Dick Stevens said the best route would be counties.
Okay.
So please don't misconstrue my words.
Well, rather than debate it, anyone who wants can just go back and listen to the recording.
Yes,
There'd
you
be
can.
no debate that way. In any case, Mr. Pidgeon, one of the, let's say one of the 4 West Side attorneys that has been cited as expert in this field, has agreed with our own legal counsel that no, the counties don't have standing to weigh in, which is why, and I'm not going to violate my own rule about talking about political action committees. I'll just say that independent private groups that have an interest certainly can, and I'm delighted that they did, but the counties don't have that opportunity. Wasack is an independent, not-for-profit, private agency that can weigh in, and I've encouraged Eric Johnson to pursue that at Wasack. It's not Franklin County's role, based on our legal counsel, to weigh into this lawsuit.
No, I was just curious if you did reach out to some of the other counties to gather support to go to Wasack.
I'm not sure I know what you mean, go to
I think we
Wasack.
were all together, and I don't say we all together, but there's probably,
Yeah, there was an executive board meeting, a general board meeting. Get my notes here so that I get it right.
there was a good number of the counties were there, though, and a lot of them had 3 commissioners there.
Yeah, there's a general membership meeting, a full board meeting, an LSC meeting. All those meetings took place last week. All 3 of these gentlemen were there. They were there for the purpose of, in part, reaching out to those other counties.
Okay, well, that was my question. I wanted to know if we did reach out to the other counties to try to gather more support.
Yeah.
Just clarification, there was only 2 gentlemen there, not 3. There was just
Oh,
Bob.
we had Keith there.
Oh, I'm
He's
sorry.
not a
He was pointing this direction. Commissioner.
I guess you're not a gentleman today. I don't know.
I've been called worse.
The reason I asked about you being at the last meeting is I pointed out that I have a personal heartburn where we're talking about cutting budgets and reducing costs, but sending 4 people to the same meeting out of town.
No, I understand it. I
Okay.
realize that. But I thought you had said you were going to reach out to some other people to gather support because it is on the agenda.
Yeah, and I talked to Eric Johnson, who I think is the most prominent person to work with in this regard. Eric could reach out to the counties. Wasack's in a strange position as well. King County is a major player in the Washington State Association of Counties by their votes and by their dues. So it isn't an easy path for him either. And I would just point out that, what's happening now is a discussion in court about an injunction that at best delays what I think is an inevitable lawsuit, and I think the lawsuit probably is inevitably followed by an appeal. This is by no means over. It's going to wind its way through the courts for some time. Time will tell. I may be dead wrong, but I don't think so. And I think the injunction piece right now is just the warm-up. And either way that it comes out, whether we participate or not, whether the judge goes left or right, I don't think it's over. I'd rather us not go spend money and weigh into something our attorneys have told us we don't have standing to do on what is really a 2-week question and a much longer issue.
So on that, I'd like to say that I was told by Eric Johnson that it took a county to initiate their involvement. Without a county stepping up, Wasatch will not engage, and they will not use their attorneys. Now, Keith, you told me prior to this meeting that what percentage of Wasatch's budget is paid by King?
I think it's about 25%.
So is Wasatch being influenced by money?
They have a fairly
This is troubling if they
comprehensive process for getting engaged in a legal matter that requires their executive board to make that decision.
So they're afraid of losing 25% of their budget, obviously, is what I'm hearing in that answer.
There are counties represented in Wasatch that are on both sides or multiple sides of the issue.
Well, there are roughly 40 votes at Wasatch. King County has 2. There's plenty of votes to carry the day.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. It's Matt Beaton. I weighed in last week, I think, on this discussion as well. We did just certify the election today. We had a little computer problem. I couldn't get home to change. Sorry about that. But I think we missed the mark last week. I think as I left it, I realized this happens a lot in government. It's happened a lot in the 9 years I've been here. What should be an act as representatives on behalf of the people of Franklin County and the 72% got hung up on the law and the legal part of it. So, I mean, how hard is it to make a resolution that says Franklin County, supports opposition to the move that's being made to the extent that the law allows, and also to send a message to Wasatch that, yes, we as a county are the first to step up and say, Wasatch, do something, and we will investigate when it's appropriate for Franklin County to act legally. That way we clear out the opinion of one person and the disagreement of lawyers. And we actually, as a county, what we do, count 72%, folks. We were all brought to these positions through that same process. And as the voice of that process, at least the one who has to certify Bob helped today, 2-day process. Either way, that's what I propose and would ask you to do on behalf of me as a citizen, is to make a motion that says, hey, this is what we support. We ask Wasatch to investigate. Hey, everybody else, 33 counties, why don't you follow us? We know where to go. So that's where I think we've been arguing legal issues, and we have a PA we should take his advice, so he's elected to give us. But let's find a way around it. Thank you, guys.
I like that.
Mr. Beaton, that is exactly what we did last week with one distinguishing characteristic. Instead of a resolution, which is written on a piece of paper, we did consensus and said for the board to approach Wasatch and express our concern and our desire for them to pick them up. So the only thing, and you go back and listen to the recordings, I listened very carefully, everything that you said was done. It's just the distinction between a resolution on paper and consensus. And there is no difference there. It doesn't change anything. But I'm more than happy at the conclusion of this to make a motion this evening to have Wasatch on behalf of Franklin County and other counties, if it is the will of the Wasatch membership, because we can't force Wasatch to do anything, to weigh in on behalf of the counties. No problem doing that. But we did that last week. We did it by consensus, and we sent these 3 gentlemen to go face-to-face with Wasatch, which they did. The only thing we didn't do was a formal resolution, which isn't required. But I'll make the motion at the end of the meeting.
Well, so let me get this straight then. Out of whatever happened last week, either one of the people that went could have said, Franklin County, as a board, they have the full power of the board of the county, and it's in the weight of this.
I didn't get that.
Not to weigh in the legal matter, but to ask Wasatch to go forward on Franklin County's behalf and on behalf of the other counties. I go back and listen to the meeting. They had the ability to do that. My understanding.
As individuals, not as a board, we didn't make a motion.
Yeah, I didn't get that. So that's why when I came out of that, and in fact, it's even the question about your individual call, and it seemed to be very clear that this was Wasatch's thing to do. But what I came away with was it really degenerated down to a legal opinion, and legal opinions vary. But I really think it's easy to have a motion that basically, and in fact, that's, I hope we get that then, and we have the power
I've
of the consensus.
already offered to make the motion, so I think
second the
to make
motion.
that issue.
Well, we got to make it,
Yeah.
write it up. But I mean, my point is, and again, I think you can also show that to the extent that we can be legally involved at the recommendation of our county PA, that's just a different message than, I'm not sure what you're hearing. I'm not sure if we can have a show of hands, but for the people that were here, I'm pretty sure I didn't come away feeling like Franklin County had the flag and was headed up to Wasatch to rally the troops. So
No, we
that's
didn't.
what I'm asking for.
Not to weigh in legally.
Again, that's what happened last week.
Right.
Let's weigh in on the 72% and the other 8 counties, as well as the power. Isn't it 23 or 25 that are 60 super majority?
25 or 60%.
And Wednesday we're going to get that thing from Judge. People are going to be mad. It'd sure be nice if they felt like, hey, somebody's got something going on, and they're not talking out, just kind of trying to manage the politics of it. It's getting old. I mean, living in this country and dealing with managing the words and the ticky-tacky crap. I don't like it. So anyway, hopefully we can get some kind of consensus, and it would be great.
So not only did they have the ability to approach Wasatch, I think if you go back and listen to the meeting, you'll find out that we asked them to do that. So.
That was my question. I wanted to know.
Yeah, well, I was the one that suggested go track down Eric Johnson
I did.
and ask him for Wasatch to take this up in the meeting, and I recommended making a motion at the general membership meeting or at any meeting that they would allow. And I heard a lot of discussion about agendas that are already set and stuff. I know from a lot of years of doing this that if you get enough counties together, and virtually every meeting starts with approving the agenda, so there's an opportunity to add it to the agenda at the start of the meeting. There was a vehicle to do that. I'm not suggesting that an opportunity was missed. I'm just saying that it could have been done there. It doesn't have to be done there. And I'll make a motion at the end of the meeting to close it out tonight that Franklin County formally approach Wasatch and ask them to participate in the legal proceeding on behalf of the counties and take a position in opposition to what King County and City of Seattle are doing. That's been my position all along. My only reluctance has been that we've got sound legal advice from very experienced attorneys that says that we don't have legal standing to weigh in as a county. But we absolutely can ask our association to do it. And I recommended that last week, and I'll recommend it again this week in the form of a motion.
Well, that was my question.
Yeah.
If you did that.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it was that murky. It's a little bit like some of the policies we have around here. They're a little murky. And so, I mean, I left it, that was a little foggier than that last week for me. So that's the reason I'm up here wasting your time right now.
You're not alone, Matt. And I would just like to ask Commissioner Peck, which counties have you persuaded to join in this movement?
I suppose you'd have to ask counties. You don't know if
No,
you've
which-
persuaded somebody. You asked me what counties I've talked with.
Well, have you got any positive results from any of the counties that you talked to?
Most of the counties that I've had conversation with have said that they have similar legal guidance that they don't have standing to weigh in. Some of them have said that they're in favor of position A and position B. A lot of them are concerned that the result is that whether 976 stays or not, the citizens are going to pay either way. 976 reduces to $30 car tabs. They feel like the legislature is just going to pile on a bunch of other fees and taxes to make up the difference. And I tend to subscribe to that philosophy. And I also believe that there's a tendency for majorities in the state legislature to be punitive with respect to Eastern Washington and Western Washington. And it's not to say we shouldn't stand up for our position. We certainly should. But we've got badly needed projects over here, a lot of which are state funded. So whether 976 stands or not, legislature's going to extract their pound of flesh and their money. And in the process, they'll decide which counties get funding for projects and which ones don't. Sometimes you got to be careful who you throw a rock at, and you need to do it thoughtfully. Just my view.
My name is John Ramsey, 8612 Whipple Drive. I just change the subject just for a minute. We just got off the doing the Special Olympics here in the Tri-Cities. We had 900 athletes. And I wanted to let everybody know that the Washington State Special Olympics has said this was one of the best presentations that went on. It was, and I apologize for not coming and inviting you, gentlemen, and your staff to this event. It was advertised, but still, I needed to come and invite the county to it. Next year, we want to fill it up. But it just was amazing. These kids are totally amazing. That being said, I want to talk just a little bit. We talk about taxes. You talk about 1%. You talk about. I don't understand this meals for meetings with the local. When the people are here locally, you say that they have to man a station for 12 hours. Guys are getting paid time and a half, double time. Bring a sack lunch. Do what you can. But this is the kind of stuff that we talk about when we're talking about the nickel and dime. This is the stuff I look at my budget at Broadmoor RV and say, hey, look, we don't do that. Yeah, we'll buy pizzas for them. We do a breakfast for our team every month. But I really strongly think this is a bad program because you're taxing again. It's a tax. Everything that you guys spend, it's a tax, and we have to get it out of our brains. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Ramsey, appreciate the comments. I do want to acknowledge that Commissioner Didier attended the Special Olympics ceremonies and represented the county. I appreciate him doing that. Some of us weren't able to attend and wanted to, so kudos to him for being there. Yeah.
Thank you, George Dockstetter again, 4951 South Landing Road. On the budget, talk about everything that's mandated by the state that cost us money. Well, it's mandated by the state for our sheriff to enforce the gun law. And is he doing it? No. And what are they doing? Nothing. Because if he enforced it, half us yahoos north of Franklin County would be down here in trouble. But you might as well pick out some of those items the state mandates and tell them to kiss off. Because that's what he did on the gun law. And it gets to the point you tell them, we can't afford it. You want us to do it? Give us the damn money. And cut the budget that way. And if they don't, then you got to start cutting. I know John's very successful and he can afford to buy breakfast once a month. I can only do it once every 2 months because I'm not that good. But I'm cheap. There you go. But the county is a different deal. It's all on tax dollars.
That's right.
It's not money out of my company, and it's not money out of John's or Kurt's Mindy's farm. It's from the average citizens in this county that own a house or a piece of property. And I hate to see the money come from the road fund because South Landing Road is just a patchwork of potholes covered up right now. And I'd like to see it fixed. But we got more problems coming. So let's cut the budget or tell the state to kiss off. Thank you.
Further comments?
I just have one analogy on this 976 and representing the citizens. It's funny that the federal government can do nothing but impeachment talks, yet when Hong Kong has a problem, both senators and congressmen got together, passed a bill to support Hong Kong. And is that what it's going to take in this country to literally riot in the street to get our government to acknowledge us? So that's all I had to say.
Comments? Hearing none, do we need an exec session tonight?
No.
Are we going to get a motion about getting Wasack engaged?
Let the chairman do his job, please.
Yeah, well, basically, I was looking for last comments.
So, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the board, I'd like to move for board consensus, which has the effect of a written resolution, for Franklin County to contact Wasac and formally request that they weigh in on behalf of this county and the other counties in the state of Washington in opposition to the legal action that is currently underway by King County and its partners with respect to 976, to be clear.
I second.
Further? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the board tonight? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.